head trash are the nasty voices in your brain that they undermine you. They might keep you up at night. They tell you untrue stories. They're definitely unkind. They're full of negative thoughts. And generally speaking, they suck your energy and limit you in just about every way.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Renie Cavallari, who is going to talk about head trash, the leading killer of human potential. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote is from Anthony DeMello. When we were young, we were programmed to unhappiness. They taught us that in order to be happy, you need money, success, a beautiful or handsome partner in life, a good job, friendship, spirituality, God, you name it. And unless you get these things, you're not going to be happy, we were told. Now, that is what I call an attachment. And an attachment is a belief that without something, you are not going to be happy. Once you get convinced of that, and it gets into our subconscious, it gets stamped into the roots of our being. You are finished. Wow. Talk about deep. I call that head trash. And we're going to chat about that today. By the way, Anthony died a long time ago. I always wished I could get him on the podcast. But we do have Don Joseph Goey coming to join us. He's in charge of Anthony's foundation. And they just released another one of his books based on his talks. So we're going to have him on Richer Soul to dig so much deeper into that quote. Stay tuned for that episode. Last week's action step was everyone either never does real estate deals or they do a bunch. So it was about taking the first step. I know the first step is difficult, but it gets easier. Make a commitment to something. It doesn't have to be real estate. And then do it once, and then decide if this is something you want to continue doing. Again, we keep coming back to this head trash, right? That keeps you from taking the first step. I know I've struggled with this in the past. It prevents us from the life we could have. Let's live the ultimate life instead of just dreaming about it. Send the trash away. Take that first step. Hey, the world is opening back up nicely to a new normal. We're going to see change. It's time to navigate a new course. Learn to shift from whatever life brings us. I can't predict the future, but I can see which way the winds are blowing, and I also know speculation abounds. And one day, it pops. It amazes me the level of speculation in the markets. And the result is always the same. The little guy gets hurt, the rich get richer, but it doesn't have to be this way. You just need to have a long-term attitude and stay away from these crazy schemes. One way to do that is to ask better questions. And it's also to question our head trash. Everyone's got this head trash. The question is, do you want to get rid of yours? That's our focus for today. We've got Renie Cavallari on, and she is the founder, CEO, and Chief Instigator of Aspire, a global transformational training and culture development company that specializes in inspired learning that shifts human behavior and awakens potential. She's also the founder of the RCI Institute in Active Thinking and People Technology Lab, an award-winning international strategist, speaker, and leadership expert when in grasp of business and its challenges. She has driven measurable results for businesses with her innovative solutions around the world for over 30 years. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Renie Cavallari. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Rocky.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and I really grew up in a working class family. My parents were both school teachers. And when it came to money, there were times that they went on strike. I would listen. I was the oldest child, so I can remember being like at the top of the stairs and listening to them try and figure out how they were going to navigate not having the money they needed to pay bills. And one in particular, the story that really imprinted on me and shaped my life was when my father was on strike and we were really struggling, and my mom had taken my sister and brother and I to the grocery store. And as we were checking out and she went to pay the bill, unbeknownst to me, up until that point, it was paying with food stamps. And that's how dire things were. And the woman behind us made a comment, and it was kind of nasty and unkind for sure. And my mom was so gracious about it. And it was a little awkward because she had to put something back because she just didn't have enough money. And so for me, I remember, that feeling of embarrassment and worry, and, we don't have enough money. And then this woman, really the feelings of anxiety associated with money really crept in for me. And yet at the same time, how my mom just navigated that so graciously, and we left, but it definitely left an imprint for me, Rocky.
And I'm sure all of us as kids are imprinted with money stories. And until we challenge them and question them, they tend to drive our behaviors as adults. And so it's always important to go back and to see what happened and see if we can change our view about what that was all about.
Absolutely. Yes, because our imprints can serve us or they can disserve us. And really, when we can dig into them, then we can create an environment where they actually can serve us. And I would tell you that those early imprints of money ended up being things that really allowed me to have a good relationship with money and to understand that money is a vehicle to help you in your life versus a vehicle that defines your life. And that really became, something where, I saved more money than probably most people throughout being an entrepreneur for the last 25 years, So I think I look at money differently and strive for it to serve my life versus to fear money.
So was there something that happened that caused you to have those change in relationships with money, or was that just naturally what occurred because of what you experienced as a child?
No, I read a lot about, wealth and money and things like, how people were successful and what success meant. And then I had mentors as I, got out of college that had healthier beliefs. So I was more interested in the quality of my life and that money was a function of it. So I looked at people that I admired and looked at some of their habits and and what they did. And that allowed me to model them. So yes, people around me, my father used to say, who you hang with is who you become. And so if you hang with people who have a lot of fears or anxiety or aren't really curious, then you have a different experience than if you are lucky enough to be around people or learning things. Today it's so easy. You can listen to a podcast about money and there's great books on money. A book that really impacted me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter. And it really shifted me in a very big way.
So you know what? Most people don't realize that Sharon Lechter is the co-author or probably the main author of that book. So most people, when they think about it, think about Robert, and they don't realize that there's somebody else involved as well.
Yes, Sharon is an amazing woman and has done so much for children in particular to help shift the mindset early on so that we don't have these fears about money.
And you have to spend the time making sure as a parent that you're appropriately setting the mindsets for kids and teaching them how to use money as a tool, which we did quite a bit when my kids were young. And, it's funny, your dad said, who you hang with is who you become. And yet at parents, I don't know how much time we spend teaching our kids that is what it is and that's why we're so concerned about who their friends are.
Yes, I agree with you, Rocky. Like I remember my daughter Bella is now 20 and she has a healthy perspective around money. And I believe it's because her father and I really focused on, giving her access to money. So she had her own debit card very early on. So she had to learn, and actually she is, she saves her money. She wants to make sure she has the money when she wants the money. And I can remember the joy of going to the bank and opening up not just getting her debit card, but also opening up a savings account and talking about how that might serve her and helping her start her first company and, allowing her to see that, now you have a company and what does that mean and how can you build from there? So I do think that I didn't have those experiences. And when I was exposed to those things later in my life, they really created less stress about money. And that means less head trash. Because the more head trash you have about money, the more it holds you back.
And that is so true. And we're going to dig into head trash in a moment. There's a couple things I'd like to cover before we do. So just out of curiosity, what kind of company has she started?
Bella has a company called Colorful, and it does a variety of things from research to she's now a spin instructor. She's gotten into fashion. So she does work where she, does drawings. And so it's the beginning, it's the formation of what she wants to do. She's off to college at ASU Barrett, where she's, earning an entrepreneurial and fashion degree. And so she's starting to form it. But what allowed her, for her to be able to have a company and start to build it, creates a mindset that's different as you start to think about, building your own wealth and security over time. So it was just another thing that we, helped her design. So it's very, very early on. And yet it is something that as you put things out, I believe when we put things out there for our children, then they get curious about them when they're ready to be curious about them.
And we don't dictate the timeline, right?
Yeah, well, that's the truth. I mean, I'd love to say we should be able to, but we really can't. That's the thing about our minds is that we control them and we should control them. And that includes our children, which is such a shame at times.
I do realize that. So let's take a step back to your childhood, because you had a quote in the book that I very much enjoyed, and it came from one of your coaches. who said, don't aspire to be the best on the team, aspire to be the best for the team. How did that impact you?
It still impacts me today, and it brings a smile to my face. Coach Hart was an amazing coach and influencer in my life. And sometimes this is the thing about teachers. We don't understand the imprints that they make for us. And she was this person who believed in me. She saw something in me because, quite honestly, Rocky, I was a terrible lacrosse player when I tried out in the 9th grade. And as I attempted to, become better and better, but her ability to help us with our mind and how we were to look at the game and how we were to play together and what our responsibility was to the team really allowed me to, to this day, to build the companies that I have and have the culture that I want in not just the companies, but in, my life. So, it really gave me a sense of that there's an exchange that has to always happen. And that is the give exchange. And that how are you giving and what are you doing so that you are really contributing, because contribution really feeds our soul. It makes us feel good. And when we feel good, we have less emotional stress. And when we have less emotional stress, we take more productive action. And when we take more productive action, we feel good. And, if you think about what success really is, it has nothing to do with money. It has to do, in my opinion, with joy. And how much joy do we have in our life? And she laid those foundations, as well as my parents, who were very enthusiastic about just about anything I was trying to do. The first company I started, I remember my father said, I sure do wish I had money because I would invest in your company. You can't beat that, right?
Absolutely. And that's a big part of, I don't think we teach as coaches, and I coached a lot when my kids were younger, is the responsibility to the team. Everyone wants to they want to blame everyone else instead of taking responsibility. And it's all about, a lot of times it's about them being the best versus the team being the best. And you have to change the culture, and you have to create a culture where everyone is important, and you have to teach that. And a lot of times we did soccer. And so the goalies would sometimes get mad when they were scored on, where the team would start yelling at them. And I'm like, I don't think you understand something. The 10 of you in front of the goalie failed before the goalie did. So if you want to blame someone, let's start with the person all the way at the other end of the field who let the ball get by them. You can't blame the last guy for what occurred today.
Well, a great coach, and my firm does quite a bit of coaching, really helps us be self-aware. Because when we, and the younger we get this muscle, because it's a brain muscle, self-awareness, the sooner we get self-awareness, the sooner we're able to have self-reflection. And when we can reflect on our behavior or reflect on how we're feeling and really be present in it, then we can start to, peel it apart to understand what's really going on and what the real limitations are. And this is such a critical component of our lives. So having a coach that can help, like what you've just shared in teaching, your soccer team, is a really foundational need for our kids. And the sooner we get it, I can't tell you how many adults I work with that are not self-aware. They just are not aware. They spend their life blaming and shaming other people versus taking responsibility and really addressing, so what is it that I want and how is it that I'm going to get it? Because anything you want in life will require you to actually take action.
That's the one step people tend to forget.
Right. Information. Yeah. Information is just information. It's of zero value if you don't utilize it. Right. So if you don't take information and understand how it applies to you in your life or your work or anything, your relationships, if you don't apply it and then you really put it into action, then it was kind of a waste of time listening to the podcast or reading the book, or, there's other things you could be doing, and that might bring you, more value against the time that you have.
And that is so true. Speaking of blame and shame, I always ask, and I like to ask women who have been successful in corporate, how has the corporate world treated you, and how do you maneuver through it? And did you have struggles?
Well, I've had Aspire, powered by Aspire, has been around we're into our 26th year. So I am the founder and CEO of Aspire, and so I deal with corporations and organizations of any kind more as a alliance and a partner in the experience. But prior to that, I was in corporate America. I did the corporate climb, and there were challenges. Growing up in corporate America in the late 80s and early 90s, there weren't a lot of women, and I really was so lucky to have mentors that believed in me and coaches that helped develop me, that forced me to be self-aware in the areas that I wasn't effective at, and that gave me resources to improve. And yet at the same time, I will tell you, when you're the only woman at the table, it does get noticed. Decisions sometimes literally, you take a break and decisions are made in the men's room because everyone went to the men's room except for you. And, or that you're not invited to something because you're a single woman and it feels a little awkward for others who might be married. And what will this look like or sound like or feel like to others who are observing? And it's a real thing. And I really focused on, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? How can I contribute in a way that serves and provides value? And that allowed me to keep my head out of things that weren't going to serve me, because I can't control other people's thoughts. So I can't control, their feelings, because you feel the way you think. And so when I understood that very early on, I didn't put a lot of energy against how to change what they were thinking. If they looked at me and didn't see me as a peer, or didn't see me as smart enough, or whatever they might have thought, like, their thoughts are none of my business. They really don't, if they really aren't helpful to me unless they're helping me. And I really tried to navigate that as best I could. Now, was it hard? Yes. Did I have tears? Absolutely. Were there times where I humiliated myself because I thought I was doing something that made sense and I didn't do it properly? There's a ton of those stories actually in the book. And I have to say that, it's through those trips and falls, even though they felt, horrible and crappy at the time, they also made me really reflective. And okay, how do I want to, how do I need to show up? And even for today, I think those habits showed up throughout my life. I prepared more because I felt that I was expected to prepare more. I can't tell you how many times people gave me this compliment. Wow, you're so much more talented than I thought. And I would be like, what the heck is that? Like, and somehow out of my mouth came, thank you. But think about that, Rocky. Like, what did you think? Evidently not much. So the bar was low. Lucky me.
And there's a quote in your book that that speaks somewhat to that from Epictetus. Men are not disturbed by things, but by the view which they take of them. And so it's our viewpoints of it. It's not actually the things themselves that disturb us. And it sounds like those people had incorrect views. And of course, we can't take that personally because, as you said, it's not within our control.
That's absolutely correct. We just can't. And yet we do. And I do as well. And I think that's where when we take things in a way where we can't own them for ourselves. So what about this, I always ask this question when something goes wrong or I'm disappointed with someone or a situation has occurred. My first question isn't what happened here. My first question is, so what do I need to understand here? Because that question gets me to a more, it's a kind of a more stable place versus into blame and shame, right? If I'm asking a question like, what happened here? What went wrong here? I'm going to be more likely to look at it from a negative perspective than if I can help myself get to a productive perspective.
And so I learned a saying that it came from referees because they're always yelled at, right? Wrong call. One side or the other is going to yell at them. And so they said the first question they started to ask when they started to get yelled at was, tell me what you saw, so that they could understand the other person's point of view and what they were seeing from their standpoint. And that helped them diffuse the situation and also get to understand what the other person's viewpoint was and what was it that was causing them to be upset or to lose their composure.
So you're right on the money. It's a brilliant question because what it does is shift the perspective. So we have this emotional brain. And when something happens where we feel that, we've been wronged or we're worried that, it's created anxiety, whatever it is, when someone can ask us a really compelling question, it shifts us from where we start, which is the disconnected side of our emotional brain. And that's where negative thoughts are. That's where anxiety is, worry, anger, all these negative feelings live on that side of our emotional brain. And we all have them. And the goal of life is to spend as much time as possible on the connected side of your emotional brain. And you have to actually shift, and questions, especially quality questions, because you can ask the question, so what happened here? Or you can ask a quality question like you just used, which is, so tell me what you saw. And that naturally decreases the emotional stress so that people can get to the connected side of their emotional brain. And that's where productive action actually lives, is in the emotional side of the connected side of our emotional brain.
Makes a lot of sense. So let's dig into the book. What inspired you to write the book, Head Trash, The Leading Killer of Human Potential?
Well, I have been blessed to work with literally tens of thousands of humans over the past 30 years in so many capacities, whether they were Cs, housekeepers, working in hotels, salespeople, customer service people, people who were, on the rise in their career to be managers, et cetera. And as a company, Aspire was really responsible for helping improve performance. That was really our mission. But what really inspired me was, how do you awaken the potential of people so that they can actually improve performance? And so this work started for me, Rocky, over 25 years ago. But I tell you, in the last 20 years, we really started studying human beings. And the RCI Institute, which is another organization that I own, it's a practical application lab where we're really looking and studying, well, how is it that we get human beings to shift or change their behavior? Because we can know what we're supposed to do, but that doesn't mean we actually do what we're supposed to do, right? So it can be with food, it can be with anything. And so in studying that, I really came to understand that when someone is highly competent at anything, there's really only three things that matter. There's their mindset, there's the skills associated with that, and then any processes that allow them to deliver or on their performance. And it could be on gardening. It doesn't have to be on being a salesperson. It could be anything. So it's mindset, skill set, process set. And where we have seen over all these years the real gap for people to achieve the goals that are either set out for themselves or that they set out, it all lands in mindset. And so Powered by Aspire has been working on this issue of mindset while we give people the skills to perform for over 25 years. So this book is really a derivative of this work and really this passion to, watch people rise. And that really came to be, this is my 6th book. And this book really was about this core topic to me.
Just out of curiosity, what are the other 5 books about?
Well, I wrote a book about girlfriend getaways years ago, and that was inspired because I had met up with John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and he had written When Mars and Venus Collide, and he had seen a white paper that I had, Powered by Aspire had done with AAA and the travel company, as well as Amex. And we had done this study on an up-and-coming trend. This was years ago. And it was a $6 billion trend that no one had identified, and it was called girlfriend getaways. And because he had written this book and he had read this white paper, he had said, my gosh, this is the emotional side of what I've just written about in this book. So John called me up and he interviewed me. And at the end of our interview, we had done a face-to-face live interview. And at the end, we had such a great time. He said, Renie, you got to write this book. And I had been, the difference, Rocky, between a writer and an author is a writer writes and an author actually publishes. And so I had written many books, but I had never actually published them. So that was the first one. And then after that came a series called Aspire, and obviously Powered by Aspire. So Aspire to Be, Aspire to Lead, which focused on our research on what really are the 6 pillars of intentional leadership. And then Aspire to Shine, which is about how do you turn on your own motivational switch. And then last year, I wrote my 5th book, and it was a fun book and about 25 lessons over 25 years, which was a celebration of Aspire and our partners throughout all those years and what I had learned. And so it's a fun book. It's called Should I Wish I Knew? And honestly, it was obsolete because it came out February 14th. And we distributed the book, and it was a gift to our clients and friends and family, et cetera, over these 25 years. And then when COVID hit, I needed to write a different book, like should have known, or something like that, because that book it's a great book, except it's just it didn't really matter much anymore. So
because everyone freaked out and the world changed, or.
Yeah, and I was in the thick of writing Head Trash, actually, at the time. So this book was really about the celebration of our 25th anniversary and the humbling lessons that, I had learned along the way that I was sharing. So I'd say it's not that it's not applicable. It just was, the timing was probably, timing has a lot of impact. And, I kind of went on to, stop writing actually Head Trash and stopped for a handful of months after that, and then got back to it in July of last year.
I don't know that. So life is always going to throw us curveballs. It's just the reality. COVID is a big curveball. I get it. That happens, but you still got to step up to the plate and swing. I mean, you can't just sit down, unfortunately. And, at this point when we're recording, we're about a year out. And by the time this comes out, it'll be a little further. But I think we're on our way out now. And we have survived, and we will continue to survive. So it's just a matter of understanding that 5 years from now or 10 years from now, there's going to be another something that's going to get thrown at us, and you just got to figure your way through it. That's all. Go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, that's what mindset's about. It's that, I think this is a great time for people to reflect on, how did you react? Because for some, people lost their jobs. Some people I coach people who, had to lay thousands of people, off or furlough them. And they had their head trash. You have people, millions of people who lost their jobs and were unsure, and people afraid, obviously, for their health, et cetera. And so how we feel about something is a reflection of how we think about it. You feel, I always say F comes before T, you feel the way you think. And so if our thoughts are anchoring fear and anchoring worry and even though there was a reason to be fearful, and actually we didn't even know how bad it was going to get a year ago, yet what were your choices? Because how we think then determines actions are going to be. So we think about things of, this is just going to, I really don't have a responsibility for any of it, it'll be fine, then our behaviors are going to look at that, and our results are going to reflect that, those choices. So that's how powerful our mindset is. And I often get asked this question, well, this is what I want in my life, and I'm just not blank enough. And, I always kind of smile and say, well, you're right. You must not be, because if that's the mindset you're choosing, then that will be your greatest limitation. And that, like I said early on, I'm a working class kid from Philadelphia. If someone had predicted that I would own several companies and would go on to write, books and have a life where I feel, the kind of joy that I get to feel, I wouldn't have said that was a great predictor. Like that was an obvious thing. That I could have had lots of reasons why that wouldn't have happened. And I wasn't really focused on, what I was going to be when I, grew up further and further and further. But I was focused on what kind of life do I want to live right now? And this great question that always stimulates me is, who do I want to be right now? And so when I'm in a space where, earlier in January, where, we had such an uproar at a Capitol, I had all the same emotions of like, what is happening in America? Where are we? And I could get angry, and I did. I was disappointed and discouraged and all those things. And when I started asking myself the question of, who do I want to be right now? It shifted me into the connected side of my emotional brain. And then I turned off the TV and I started working on things that were productive, that I could control, that I could imprint to then make it, the world, to do what I could to improve the situation, versus kind of getting sucked into the negativity of everything that was happening, it was terrible, but it wasn't serving me to be in the disgust of it, right?
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And that is so true. And there's a quote in your book that I think kind of takes all of this and it just brings it all down, which is, your thoughts determine your focus determines your actions. When you have positive thoughts, you turn on your motivational switch. When you feel motivated, you gain the energy and clarity you need to take effective action.
That sums it up.
That sums it up.
It really does. I couldn't have said it better myself. I do believe that to be true. I'm certainly living proof of it. And when I'm at my best, when I'm in my happy space and I'm really thinking and being creative and giving. Giving is such a great way when we're in gratitude and we can give. It's a great way to help us be in the connected side of our emotional brain. And that makes us, do productive things. So take those effective actions.
So let's kind of go to the other side, because you talk about 4 big lies in the book. And the 4 big lies were, I must be right, I must never lose, everyone must love me, I must feel comfortable. So can you dig into those?
Yes. So first of all, what's really important to understand in the book is that, and the book goes into this in great depth before we go to the big lies, is that these lies only live on the disconnected side of your emotional brain. So when we're on the connected side of our emotional brain, this is where we're productive, we're collaborative, we feel good, we're positive, we're breathing, we're doing the healthy things in our life, right? That's the connected side of our brain. And this disconnected side where we have these ugly thoughts, right? We have, there's those nasty voices, and those voices might keep you up at night. They can exaggerate your fears. They certainly limit your potential. I mean, they're a troop of naysayers, right? So each of us, and we've identified, each of us have one big lie. So we don't have all 4. We only have one of these. And it's not a lie like there's one that's better than the other. They all live on the disconnected side of the emotional brain. And each human being has one that lives over there. And so as you look at them, I must be right. So when something happens, so I want you to imagine, an event happens, because life is full of events, right? So an event happens, and for whatever reason, it goes into your head and it decides to land on the disconnected side of your emotional brain. And there, depending on what degree of upset you have, so it might be that you have a little anxiety about it, but if you really move into fear or worry or disbelief or disappointment, you can trigger this belief. And so the I must be right, which is the first big lie, this is where a person can get very aggressive about explaining something and ensuring that in their explanation that the other person is wrong. So imagine you're having an argument with, and by the way, this is great to understand whether it's business, this is life. This is in your relationship. So you could be having an argument with your partner, whether it's a business partner or your home partner. You could be having this argument. And if a person is in the disconnected side of their emotional brain, and you're trying to have a conversation with them and you're in the disconnected side, you will keep repeating yourselves. You will go nowhere. But that's why sometimes, people say, give it a little space. But if they're in the disconnected side and their I must be right lie gets triggered, they will move into control and command. They will be absolutely certain that they are right, and they will use data. They will drill in, and they will tell you that there is only one way, and it is this way. They're absolutely right, and they'll frequently use the word right when they're operating from that disconnected side. So that's the I must be right. Then there's the I must never lose, and that's the second big lie. Now remember, you wouldn't have both of these. You'd only have one of these 4. And this is the person who I must never lose. So let's say they are feeling like they've just they're losing market share in their business, or and they're the sales director, or they are feeling like they are not getting something done that absolutely must get done, and it's not good enough, and they're really uptight about it. So if this person has the I must never lose big lie, they tend to get very aggressive when they're going to lose. So they can be highly inconsiderate, because the win is everything. So they start looking around, and they look around and decide who can help me here win. And if you can't help them, they won't even know you're in the room. They are that laser focused. They are poor losers. And when I say laser focus, it's not a compliment. It's like a knife. It goes straight to it. And they will be winning, and there might be dead bodies everywhere, but they will be getting to the goal, to the end zone as far as they're concerned. And so when you're dealing with a person like this is how you can even say, to help them move to the other side of their brain, you can even say things like, so how can I help you win here? Or what is it that needs to happen for us to get where we need to go? So when you ask someone a question, because that's the most important thing to understand, is you want to understand what your big lie is, and then also how to navigate when someone else's big lie is leading their charge. And it's really, we go into great depth, obviously, in the book. The third big lie is the everyone must love me lie. And these are the love bugs of the world. They're devastated when they feel a lack of connection has occurred between them and someone else. They're over the top people pleasers. They're hyper connected in terms of their need when they're on the disconnected side of their emotional brain. Because I would tell you, I'm not an everyone must love me. That's not my big lie. But when I'm in the connected side of my, brain, I love for everyone to love me. I mean, come on, who doesn't love that? It's when you're in that disconnected side. And so they can procrastinate over addressing issues. They can really avoid things where they're not feeling connected. They will do anything to avoid hurt feelings. And so sometimes they can be nice over kind. Like, nice is that you're not going to say anything because you don't want to hurt someone's feelings, but it's not really very kind because you should say it, And so, but losing a sense of connection for them is like death. And then you have the last big lie, which is the I must be comfortable. And the I must be comfortable really is uncomfortable with chaos. So things changing quickly feels way, 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 way out of control, and they need a little time to process. So, imagine that, you feel that, there's a problem, you're moving quickly to solve it, and you have an I must be comfortable who's on the disconnected side of their brain, and they may be even looking at you saying, okay, because they're too uncomfortable to say they're not okay, until they get so uncomfortable that they go postal. That's the person who tends to go, they just blow up. And all of a sudden you're like, what happened here? I thought we were aligned. And they really were just so uncomfortable that they finally spoke. So the goal isn't to label people, because that's the worst thing that you can do. Like, I happen to be, I must never lose. And you don't want to say to me, hey, how's that not losing working for you today? Because it'll just tick me off, right? It'll keep me in that disconnected side. And as leaders and friends and lovers and humans, we want to do everything possible to help people get to the connected side of their emotional brain. And this is part of what's happening in our world right now, is we have so many people in the disconnected side, they can't listen over there. It's unhealthy. It's physically unhealthy, emotionally unhealthy. And it triggers their big lie. And so this big lie is an aggressive stance that occurs. And we've identified these four.
And the good thing is you have 3 steps on how to fix this as well. And the 3 steps are so simple, right? So step 1 is own it. Step 2 is shift it. And step 3 is dump it. So let's dig into these.
So when we are on the single greatest thing we can do for ourselves is be aware when we're on the disconnected side. That's the single greatest thing, because when we're aware of it, then we know are about to be highly ineffective, right? Because good behavior, good choices don't live on the disconnected side, because we've got all this noise over there and negativity, and what's on the disconnected side is undermining us. So the beauty of owning it, though it's hard, because not everyone, as we talked earlier, is self-aware. And so when you're self-aware, then you can self-reflect and go, okay, what's up with this? Why am I doing this? What is it that I really want, right? So we start to really anchor in, like, owning this feeling that we're having and owning the thoughts around that feeling. And then once we do that, then we're conscious, we're out of our kind of haze of upset. And this is what happens like in the middle of the night when you can't sleep. We haven't owned it. We're sticking in we're in the problem. We're not owning our part of it. And there's a big difference there. And so when we own it, okay, then we can start to shift it. That's by asking what I call productive questions. And not all questions are productive, right? And so we want to ask questions like the one I shared with you earlier, which is, so who do I want to be right now? Because when we get frustrated and angry with people, we tend not to be the person we'd like to be. And that usually doesn't improve the situation. We act out, we respond and we're going to react to something. And it tends not to be our best self. And, I love this one question, which is, what about this is important for me to understand? And I want to understand it so that I can get what I need or what I want. And that starts to hit the shift button. And when we start to ask questions that are productive questions, right? So what's the next step I can take so that I can blank, whatever it is that I want, so that I can have peace with this person, so that I can have a productive solution, so that I can blank. So what's the first step? Allows me, it empowers me to start moving towards what I want versus being stuck in what I have and I don't want. And once I start asking those questions, now all of a sudden I can dump it. I can dump the head trash because I'm replacing it with productive action. So that owning it decreases that emotional stress we discussed earlier. It takes it down. And as does the questions that you start to ask, because the quality of your life really does come down to, well, what are the choices and actions that you take? But to get to the choices and actions, you have to ask productive questions. You have to ask questions that serve you. And when you ask questions like, why did that happen? Well, that's not necessarily going to serve you. It may not. Or, for me, like a question like, what was this person thinking? That isn't going to serve me. What I might ask is, a question of, I wonder what they see as the outcome. Or I wonder how they see this. That all of a sudden shifts me to be able to be open to hear what they're about to tell me.
And we need to be open to it.
Right. And that's called a dialogue. A great conversation is a dialogue. And this is what's, happening so much right now is that we have monologues and we have only one way to see it. And we have, politically, we've never been, further apart in our inability to communicate. It's this way or the highway. And that isn't how, problems don't get solved without collaboration. But we have to have a mindset of collaboration. And that means that we have to be on the connected side of our emotional brain.
Makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. I'm going to take a step back because we probably didn't define this well, which is, what is head trash and does everyone have it?
So the answer is yes. If you're breathing, you have it. I can't tell you if you're dead if you still have head trash, but if you're breathing, we all have head trash because head trash are the nasty voices in your brain that they undermine you. They might keep you up at night. They tell you untrue stories. They're definitely unkind. They're full of negative thoughts. And generally speaking, they suck your energy and limit you in just about every way. So that head trash what's important to understand is that our head trash comes through the imprints and perceptions that we have, right? So these thoughts that we have and beliefs that we have trigger our head trash. And when that trigger occurs, it's usually because, we have a belief or we've had an imprint or an experience in our life that has left a residue. And so now we believe in something pretty strongly. Or head trash triggers our fears. So our fear of not being good enough, or our fear of someone finding out, that I'm incompetent. I hate that fear, and I am incompetent. So what is it? How do we navigate that? So if we're focused on the things that we fear, then we have more of them. And yet we all have fears, and they're just different for, every human being. And frequently they're different because of what we've been exposed to or how we've been exposed to it and the imprints that it leaves. So one person may be exposed to, going back to, being a woman who grew up in corporate America in the 80s and 90s, when, things, there weren't many women, there wasn't much of a voice, etc. And though it was certainly better than when my mom was growing up at the time, how I came to see that had to do with the influences around me and my choice of how I was going to have that serve me or disserve me. It was really that. And so when we have, I was so blessed, there were lots of, well, not lots, but there were two women in particular that I worked that were higher up in the food chain than me, so to speak. And I admired them both, and they both had this great style. And I came to understand that I could still be a woman and feminine and yet still be strong and respected at the table. And those imprints were incredibly important for me throughout my career so that I could be who I was and not have to, fake it. So head trash really are those negative voices that are in your head and what they're doing to you.
And we all need to overcome them and work on them and deal with them. It's another thing they don't teach you in school, how to deal with head trash. And it sure would save people a lot of trouble if they learn that skill early on. Another thing that we'll have to put on the list for kids.
I so agree. Imagine the schoolyard if children understood head trash. Imagine bullying. Imagine what, there's all these things that are just a derivative of the head trash and what they're being exposed to. If someone's bullying, research indicates that they were likely in some way bullied. And what are the imprints that experience had on them? And that's where their head trash is. So then they have a response to that. And if we can help them not be in that disconnected side, then that head trash isn't triggered. Then all of a sudden they're the human being they were meant to be.
And as you said, it's a muscle. We've got to practice, and it's not going to be perfect. And you just keep working at it, and little by little, you make changes. And over time, hopefully, you quiet the mind down. But it's not that it's ever going to stop. It's just that you learn to observe it and laugh at it in a sense, and go, "Oh, look what's happening. Head trash is coming up. I got to go somewhere else at the moment. Sorry, see you later." Because you can't stop it, but you can learn to ignore it and to put it back down and leave it in its little place.
And manage it. And you can learn to dump it so that, you replace it. There's really two ways to look at shifting out of your head trash. One is building proactive muscle, right? And the other is reactive. So we talked about the reactive, like is asking the question, asking more productive questions and really seeing what are you thinking about and then checking in on your environment, because sometimes you do need to just change your environment. But if you really put effort against being proactive to decreasing your head trash, then it won't get triggered as quickly. So when you have a lot of it, and there's a lot of things that you can do, from meditating, journaling, moving from gratitude, because gratitude certainly, fuels joy. Some people are, exercise people, so it might be you like hiking, biking, running, working out. And if you don't like any of those, I'm not a runner unless you're chasing me. But if you, take a walk, what's your thing? Because when we decrease that emotional stress, we are less likely to trigger the head trash. That's why sleep is important. Breathing is important. Even escapism, where we're, watching something that makes us laugh on TV, or eating healthy. These types of things, and we actually, there's over 29 of them in the book, where we literally look at them and say, these are the things that, like, I use the analogy of why we need exercise. We exercise so that we have the strength that we can call on and the stamina we can reach for when we need it. Right? That's why we exercise. So the same thing is true about exercising your emotional brain, doing things that build the strength of muscle so you can lean into it. And the easiest way to really do that is to start really looking at the habits that you have in your life. And do they serve you and bring you more joy, or do they disserve you?
A mirror is very helpful.
It sure is.
So we've been talking a lot about action throughout this episode, and I always like to ask, what is an action step people can take this week to move forward?
Great question. And I love it because, as we talked about earlier, nothing changes without changing a behavior and taking action. So I would tell you that the single greatest thing that you want to look at is, what are your habits? And there's two types of habits that serve you and habits that disserve you. So here's the trick. You want to stop doing things that don't serve you. And literally, you can write them down. So watching the news before you go to bed might not be serving you, or, being hooked on social media that ticks you off or doesn't, you do it the first thing in the morning. It's like, I one of the habits I stopped doing is getting up and reading my email right away. I get up, I change my hat, I do my meditation. I happen to like to meditate and journal. So I do those things. I like my yoga as my exercise. They all put me in that connected side of my emotional brain so that when I go into my email, I'm not like, wah. But if I start with my email, I usually don't go back and meditate, right? So that's what I mean by habits and the patterns that serve you or not serve you. And, I even say, look around. Who are you hanging with? Are you hanging with people who suck your energy, suck your spirit? You can't spend time. You have to give those people some space. And then, the habits that serve you really are the things that you can do on a daily basis. Now, for me, and this is where you have to be, self-aware. I like to organize my day the day before. I have everything in kind of work through, because it's the only chaos I can control. And that's the problem with head trash, is that it feeds on chaos and uncertainty, and it likes it. So it goes against harmony, head trash. And so where you can really zero in on those habits that serve you, and then eliminate, add habits that serve you and eliminate habits that aren't.
And that is so true. I try to plan out my week. So usually either late Friday or early Saturday, I will look at the following week, see what's coming up, see what I need to prepare for. And then the day before, I do a quick check and double check and make sure that I am ready to roll and that I didn't miss anything. So when the day comes, it's not a struggle and I'm not freaking out in the moment. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Hanging with people I enjoy and learn from, and doing work I love.
You are the average people of the 5 people around you. So picking the right 5 people and picking the work that isn't work, that's fun, that you tap dance to work, like you knock those 2 out. And I think life is pretty good. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That it was my head trash that was holding me back, nothing else.
Right? It's us. Like the answer is always within us. We don't need anything else. We just need to face it. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Your mindset will be the best indicator of how much joy you're going to have in the next 70 years.
And so joy is the result of our mindset, or our mindset creates joy. It's a question of, did the chicken or the egg come first?
Yeah, I think from my perspective that our mindset opens us up to happiness. And then when we feel happy and we feel gratitude, these feelings that we have, they really are the formation of joy.
Makes a lot of sense. If people would like to learn more about your work, find out about the book, how should they connect with you and find all this information?
So thank you. And so if you go to myheadtrash.com, and you can buy the book there, and it clicks you right over to Amazon. And you can also sign up for free for the VIP membership, and that gives you access to all kinds of tools on the website. And there's no shenanigans. We just really are trying to give people the resources they need to awaken their potential and really, find their inner strength. So that's at myheadtrash.com. And then you can also reach me through that site or at Renie at poweredbyaspire.com.
And we will put that all in the show notes to make it easy for people to find you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
I really enjoyed the conversation with Renie. Check out her book, Head Trash, The Leading Killer of Human Potential. The real question is, what are you doing to fix yours? I'm constantly working on this, and I still need help. She provided us with 3 steps. Step 1, own it. Step 2, shift it. Step 3, dump it. Life is usually pretty simple. Doing simple is hard. Let's start by asking ourselves better questions that serve us. Maybe start the habit and use the power of journaling or having a daily system to review our day, like she talked about. This week's action step was to examine our habits and ask, are they serving us? Then stop doing the ones that don't serve you. I know it's so easy to say, so hard to do. How about the 4 lies? Which one is yours? The first big lie was, I must be right. The second was, I must never lose. The third one was, everyone must love me. Number 4 was, I must feel comfortable. Which one do you own? I know for me, it's I must be right. I'm working on it. Lots to think about this week. Next week, we have on Mandy McAllister. I met Mandy at Unleash the Power Within with Tony Robbins. We're going to chat about her program, Aspire, Women Finding Their Purpose. Hey, if you like the episode, please share it with someone you think might have some head trash. Help them out. I'm sure they'll appreciate you for that. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.